Hello class, so this topic is on algebraic expressions and equations. And so here is the first problem. John has saved $30. He earns $7.50 per hour at his job. He plans to buy a plane ticket to Florida for $300. Enter the minimum number of hours John must work in order to buy the plane ticket to Florida. I'll go ahead and let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. If you said 36, that is the correct answer. And this is how we work this problem out. So we know we need $300 in order to buy this plane ticket. But John already saved $30, so we already made progress. And now he just needs $270 left in order to buy the plane tickets. And so what you want to do is take that dollar amount that he needs and divide it by the rate, which is his rate is $7.50, and that will tell you the hours work that is needed. And so this as a general thumb of rule, when you are trying to have, if you have a rate and you're trying to have, let's say the desired unit is in the denominator, so it's hours. So from there, that means you want to divide by the actual rate in order to get the desired unit that you want. But if it was in the numerator, then you want to times that rate. And so since we are looking for hours work, we want to divide the rate when that desired unit is in the denominator. And so from there, you take $270 divided by $7.50 per hour. The dollar amount ends up canceling out, and you're left with hours. And so 270 divided by $7.50 is equal to 36 hours that is needed. Please do not get things confused when you have that denominator that you need and you end up multiplying. That ends up not giving you hours work. It gives you dollars squared divided by hours, which is wrong. So let's make sure that we pay attention to what the units are and what is the desired unit that we're trying to have as far as the output of the solution. And here is the next question. Enter the number that makes the equation true. So what we're trying to do, you see this box right here. We're trying to figure out what number should replace this box in order to make this entire equation true. And I'll let you go ahead and work on this and pause the video. Okay, now that you worked on this problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. If you said 9, that is the correct answer. So notice that you have 27 over 100 on the left side of the equation. On the right side of the equation, you have 27 over 100. So those two cancel out. We don't have to worry about that. So now we have 0.09, and then we have a fraction version of that. And so when you're trying to convert a decimal into a fraction, you pretty much go by this rule. When you have one number behind the decimal, that is the tenth spot. So that means that equals 1 divided by 10. And so if you have the 1 in the 100th position, that means you have 1 divided by 100. And then if you go all the way out to the third position, which is the thousandth position, then that is 1 divided by 1,000. And so now that we're dealing with our problem is 0.09. That 9 is in the 100th position. So it's 9 divided by 100, which is perfect for this form because we have the 100 and 100. The only thing we're missing is whatever this box is, and that box value is 9. And so that makes 9 your final answer. And you fill in 9 in the box. Here is the next problem. Enter the value of 3.4 times, in parentheses, 6 plus 12. So this dot that you see right here, that means the same thing as times. And I'll let you go ahead and work out. Okay, now that you worked out the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said 61.2, that is the correct answer. So dealing with this type of equation, you have to utilize PIDMUS. And remember that P stands for parentheses, E is exponents. M and D have the same priority, and that's multiplication and division. And then addition and subtraction has the same priority, okay? And so now that we look at this equation, we know we're supposed to do the parentheses first. And so you have 6 plus 12, which is equal to 18. And from there, you have 3.4 times 18. And so when you're dealing with decimals and timesing it by a whole number, what makes things a little bit easier is if you just times to do two numbers without including the decimal. So you have 18 times 34. And so 4 times 8 is 32. So you have a 2 here, and you put a 3 on the top, and you have 4 times 1, which is 4, plus that 3 that was on the top. That makes 7. And then when you try to move over to the next digit, you have a 0 that goes to the ones position, and then you start off at the 10th position because this is the this number right here is in the 10th position. And so from there you have 3 times 8, which is equal to 24. So you have the 4 here, and you have a 2 that's located here. And so 3 times 1 is 3, and then 3 plus 2 is 5, and so you have a 5 there. Then you add the two numbers together. 2 plus 0 is 2, and 7 plus 4 is equal to 11. And then from there you have 1 plus 5 is equal to 6. And so now your total number is 612. Now we got to put in what we're doing with the decimal point. And so I highlighted in blue, where is that decimal point? And so we see that we have one digit that is behind the decimal point. So therefore you just highlight one number and put a decimal in front of that digit. And so thus you have 61.2 as your final answer. Now what if the value was 1.8? Then you do it in this fashion where you have the digit that's highlighted right here. The decimal point is there, and the decimal point is also located here between the 3 and the 4. And so therefore, with your final answer, you highlight the numbers that is equal to the amount of decimal places that you have, and make sure you add a decimal point in front of that highlighted number, and thus you have 6.12 as your final answer if this was 1.8 times 3.4. Okay? And we'll continue on. Here is the next problem. Which number line shows the solution to the inequality? 5x plus 3 is greater than or equal to negative 17. And you have these options to see which one is the inequality that matches this number line. And I'll let you pause the video. Okay, now that you worked out this problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. If you said C, that is the correct answer. And so what we want to do is take this inequality and make it into a form that we can work with. And so what we need to do is have the x by itself on the left hand side. And so we got to get rid of this 3 and we got to get rid of the 5. How we do that is, since it's plus 3, you minus 3 on both sides. And that gets rid of the 3 on the left side. And you have negative 17 minus 3. That gives you negative 20s. Because remember, if you have a negative number minus another number, you're adding the numbers together and you have an overall negative value. And so we have 5x is greater than negative 20. We still need to get rid of this 5. And so you have to think of the reciprocal. So what x is being times by 5, so the reciprocal is being divided by 5 to get rid of the 5. And so if you divide by 5 on both sides, 5 divided by 5 is equal to 1. And now you have that x on the left side by itself. And negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. And now everything is in the correct form. And you have x is greater than or equal to negative 4. Now we got to look at these number lines and which one actually correlates to x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So this one, option A, this is saying that x is greater than or equal to 4. And so that is wrong because we are looking for negative 4, not 4. And when you see a dot filled in, that means or equal to. So it's equal to 4, and then anything above 4 as going on to infinity is what x can be. So that is not what we're working with. So that's why A is not the answer. B, it has 4, it's filled in, but it's going less than the value of 4. And that means for this inequality, this would be x is less than or equal to 4. But that's not what we have in this final form. We have x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So that makes B incorrect. And so you see right here for C, which is the correct answer, you see that dot is filled in. That is that equal sign right here, that underline. When you see that underline, that means equal. And when you see, you can think of it as the gator. The gator wants to eat the bigger number, so that means this is greater than. And so from there, this is negative 4. And all of these values is greater than negative 4. And it goes on to infinity. So this matches x equal x is greater than or equal to negative 4. And so for D, you have the equal to sign, but it's going in the opposite direction. So this means x is less than or equal to negative 4, and that's not what we have in our final form. So that is why D is incorrect, and the only answer that is correct is C. And here is the next problem. A gardener buys a rake and a pair of gloves for each of the 12 volunteers in the gardening club. Each pair of gloves costs $8. The gardener spends a total of $300 on both rakes and gloves. Enter an equation that models the situation with R, the cost of one rake. And I'll let you go ahead and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you created the correct equation that mimics this expression that we have written out in this word problem. So if you said 12R plus 96 equals 300 or something that is similar to that, that is the correct answer. And so how you want to break this down is, you know, you have rakes and you know you have gloves, and both of them in total is costing $300, because that's what it says. Both rakes and gloves is costing $300. So that is written right here. And so now we got to define these two variables, the gloves and the rakes. And so we know we have 12 volunteers, but we have no idea how much the cost of the rakes are. And so where it says in this last sentence, we want to designate R as the cost of one rake. And so one rake times 12 will tell us the total amount of rakes cost that we use to contribute to the total cost of what was spent. And then as far as the gloves, we know we have 12 volunteers, and each pair of gloves costs $8. So you have 8 times 12 will be the contribution of how much the gloves cost by itself to contribute to this $300. And then from there, all you have to do is do 8 times 12, which is equal to 96. And now you have your final equation that has an algebraic expression that correlates to this word problem. And here's the next problem. Which number line shows the solution to the inequality x plus 1 is greater than 5? Something I should have mentioned a little bit earlier is, what is an inequality? So inequality, if you remember, we used to be like, okay, x is equal to 1 or x is equal to 2. Those are very much defined x values. But if x can be multiple values, more than just one value, then that is what we call an inequality. So that's why they stick the n in front of equality, because it's more than one value that the variable can equal to. And so with this being said, you have x plus 1 is greater than 5, and then you have all of these options as far as number lines and seeing if it correlates to this inequality expression. And I'll let you pause the video and work on this. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. If you said A, that is the correct answer. So once again, we got to take this inequality and make it into a form that we can work with the x on the left side and everything else on the right side. And so we have to get rid of that plus 1. How to get rid of it is by minusing 1 on both sides. And so then the 1's cancel out and you're left with x. And 5 minus 1 is equal to 4. There's no underline in there. You have to have an open circle there. And so you see a 4, you add the 4, there should be an open circle because there is no underline there. And then from there, anything that's greater than 4, that is what this number line is saying. And that is what x is saying. X is greater than 4. So any number that is greater than 4 matches the number line that we see right here. And so as far as B is incorrect because you have that dot that's filled in. That means x is greater than or equal to 4. And so that is not what we have here. So that is why that is incorrect. There is no line that's underneath this greater than symbol. B is incorrect. Then you have C. C means x is less than or equal to -4. And you see we're not at -4, we are at 4. And so that is incorrect. We're not working with this sort of inequality. And for D, this means x is less than -4. So whatever value that we can get that is less than 4 is what x can possibly be. But we know that x is greater than 4, so we are up here. And so this makes D the incorrect answer. Okay, here's the next problem. Jeremiah takes a taxi home from the mall. The taxi company charges $3 as an initial cost to pick him up and $2.50 for every mile to his destination. Jeremiah's ride home costs a total of $24.25. Enter an equation to represent the situation. Let M represent the number of miles to his house. And I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So, if your answer was for your equation 3 plus 2.5 times m equals to 24.25, that is the correct answer. And so how do we get to this equation is when we look at this word problem, we know the initial flat fee that is first charged by the taxi is $3. So we know that that is being charged. What else we do know is the total cost that Jeremiah's ride home actually costs is $24.25. So that would be on the right side of the equation, which is the total cost. What we don't know is the amount of miles that Jeremiah ends up traveling, but we know the rate. And so if you have miles times the rate, then you will have the dollar amount that he is being charged. And remember, when you're dealing with rates, if you have the desired units in the numerator, because we want to have dollar amount, because that's what we're trying to figure out, the cost of his ride going back home. That means you times the rate. And so you have that flat fee plus you have miles times the rate, which will end up being a dollar amount. So you have a dollar amount plus another dollar amount will have the total cost that's in a dollar amount. So everything is in units of dollars. And then from there, you just simplify things out where the information that you can write out as far as an equation. And you have $3 plus M as in miles times the rate of $2.50 per mile, and that is equal to $24.25. So make sure we are not doing miles divided by the rate. Here is the next problem. Cindy bought 4 boxes of cereal and 2 gallons of milk for a total cost of $24.18. Each box of cereal costs $4.30. Enter the cost in dollars of 1 gallon of milk. I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said $3.49, that is the correct answer. So how do we get to this solution? So first of all, you have a certain number of boxes of cereal plus gallons of milk, and they're telling you that total cost is $24.18. So now we got to figure out how many boxes of cereal and how many gallons of milk that we are paying for. And so we know that we have 4 boxes of cereal. That's what listed right here. And we know each of those boxes costs $4.30. So you times those two numbers together, 4 times $4.30, to get the total amount of cost the boxes of cereal cost. Now we got to figure out the gallons of milk. And we know we have 2 gallons, so we have a 2, but we don't know how much the milk actually costs. So that is the value that we are trying to figure out. And now we're in a form that we can work with 4 times $4.30 plus 2 times some variable, which is the cost of the milk, the gallon of milk, equals this total cost of $24.18. From there, 4 times $4.30 is equal to $17.20 plus 2m once again equals to $24.18. We got to get m by itself. So we need to get rid of this 17.20. And what you do on one side of the equation, you have to do on the other. So we minusing the $17.20 on both sides. That cancel out that $17.20 and leaving 2m by itself. And then we have $24.18 minus $17.20, which equal to $6.98. From there, we still have a variable that is in front, a number that is in front of the variable m. And so we have to do the reciprocal. So since it's being times by 2, we have to divide by 2. And 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. What you do on one side of the equation, you have to do on the other. And so 6.98 divided by 2 is equal to $3.49. And that is how we get to the final answer. Here is the next problem. A group of 8 friends each buy 1 ticket and 1 small popcorn at the movie theater. Each ticket costs $7.50. The group of friends spends a total of $83.60. Enter the cost of 1 small popcorn. I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on this problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So, if you said $2.95 is your answer, you are correct. How to do this is by first looking at the total cost. The $83.60 will be on the right side of the equal sign because that is the total cost. And then what makes up that total cost is the ticket cost and the small popcorn cost. So those two components is equal to $83.60. Now we got to find the cost of each of these components. And so as far as ticket, there is 8 friends and each of the tickets cost $7.50. So you take $8 times the ticket cost of $7.50 to have the cost contribution of the ticket. And then as far as the small popcorn, we still have 8 friends, but we don't know the cost of 1 popcorn. And so we plug in some variable that will represent the cost of 1 small popcorn. So I just put the letter P for the cost of 1 small popcorn. And at the end, at the other side of the equal sign is the total cost, which is once again $83.60. Now we got to solve for this algebraic expression. And you have 8 times $7.50, which is equal to 60. And then you have plus 8 times P is equal to $83.60. We got to get rid of the 60 because we're trying to get P to be by itself. And so you minus 60 to cancel it out. And what you do on one side of the equal sign, you have to do on the right side of the opposite side of the equal sign. Because things have to be balanced. And so from there we have 60 minus 60, that is 0. Now you have 8p, and then you have $83.60 minus $60 will give you $23.60. And then from there we got to get p by itself. It's being multiplied by 8. we have to do the reciprocal. And so that is the dividing by 8, which is the opposite. And so if you have 8 divided by 8, you get 1. And what you do on one side, you have to do on the opposite side. So that $23.60 has to also be divided by 8, which gives you the cost of $2.95 as the cost of your popcorn. But if you ever want to check your work, plug in $2.95 into your expression. If it doesn't equal to $83.60, you did something wrong and you need to figure out where you had your error in your math. Okay, here's the next problem. Identify all expressions equivalent to 3/4 times 8 divided by 2 minus 1. And as a reminder, you will need penmanship in order to do this appropriately. And so you got to figure out which of these expressions is equal to this expression that I just listed out. And I'll go ahead and let you work on this problem. And as far as your choices, you have 6 divided by 3, -1 plus 3. You have 4 times 3/4 minus 1. And then finally you have 3/4 times 8 divided by 1. And I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said A, B, and C, then you are correct. And so how do we do this is first we need to evaluate this equation or expression that we have here. And so let's make our life easy. You don't have to do 3 times 8. What you can do is 8 divided by 4. And remember, we're doing penmanship. And so we got to do multiplication and division first. And so you start from the left and you make your way right. And so 8 divided by 4 is equal to 2. And you still have that 3. So 3 times 2 is equal to 6. And so from there, now we have 6 divided by 2, which is equal to 3. And then now you can put in the component of minusing 1. And 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. You do not want to start off with 2 minus 1. That will give you the wrong answer. And when you're dealing with division and multiplication, they have the same priority. And so when you're dealing with that, to start from left to right and you cannot go wrong. And so, since we have a value of 2, we got to see if this expression is equal to 2. And so 6 divided by 3 is 2. And so that's why A is correct. Minus 1 plus 3. You can think of it as 3 minus 1. It means the same exact thing. And so 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. So B is the correct answer as well. And now as far as the C option, you have 4 and you have a 4 in the denominator. So 4 over 4 is 1. And so this is make your life easy. You don't have to do 4 times 12. Just do 4 divided by 4, which is equal to 1. 1 times 3 is equal to 3. And then from there you have 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. Remember not to do subtraction first. That will give you the wrong answer. Make sure you do the multiplication or division first. And so that since this value is equal to 2, we know that that is the correct answer. And so for the last option, we have 3/4 times 8 divided by 1. You have 8 can be divided by 4, which is equal to 2. And you have that 3 that's still remaining. So 3 times 2 is equal to 6. And then from there, you have 6 divided by 1 is equal to 6. It is not equal to 2, thus making D the wrong answer. Here's the next problem. Select all expressions equivalent to 3 1/2 times 4 plus 1 times 5 plus 6 times 0.5. And you have to see whether or not this expression is equal to these expressions that are listed here. We have 15 times 5 plus 3. And then for option B, you have 14 plus 5 plus 6 times 1/2. And then option C is 3 1/2 times 4 plus 5 plus 3. And I'll let you pause the video to work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on this problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said B and C, that is correct. And so first what we want to do is evaluate this expression and figure out what does this equal to. And so 3 1/2 is the same thing as 3.5. So we want to first try to figure out do our multiplications and see what this actually equals. So you have 3.5 times 4. And so 4 times 5 is 20. And then you have 4 times 3, which is 12, plus that 2 that came from that 4 times 5, that was equal to 20. And so 12 plus 2 is equal to 14. And then from there, we know that we only had one number behind the decimal point. So thus, we highlight the last number and make sure that the decimal point is in front of that number that is highlighted. And so that means 3.5 times 4 is equal to 14. And then as far as this multiplication, you will see that this is 6 times 0.5. You can get rid of the decimal point and just have 6 times 5 and highlight 5 because we know that there is a decimal point in front of the 5. And 6 times 5 is 30. And so since you have one number behind the decimal point, you have the very last number highlighted and make sure that the decimal point is in front of that number. And that means 6 times 0.5 is equal to 3. And from there you have 14 plus 5 times 1 plus 3. And the last thing that you need to work out as far as multiplication is 5 times 1, which is equal to 5. Now everything has the right priority, and now you can just do 14 plus 5 plus 3, which is equal to 22. So now we got to see these expressions and which one is equal to 22, which should be B and C. And so when we have 15 times 5, that equals to 75 plus 3, which is equal to 78. That is not 22. So now we know A is not the correct answer. So for this one, we got to do Pitmas. So we got to do 6 times 1/2 first. And so make your life a little bit easier. We got 6 and we have the 2 in denominator. So you can do 6 divided by 2, which is equal to 3. And so we have from there, we keep that 14 plus 5 plus, and now we have 3 times 1. That 1 is still remaining from the fraction. And so once you do 3 times 1, that is equal to 3. And now you can add things together where 14 plus 5 is equal to 19 plus 3 is equal to 22. And thus we have 22 as the final answer, which is equivalent to that expression. And as far as this expression, we have 3 1/2 times 4 plus 5 plus 3. We already did this before, which was in the original expression, and we know that is equal to 14. And so we have 14 plus 5 plus 3, and that is equal to 22. And since it equals to 22, that is equivalent to this expression listed up here. And that is how you get B and C as the correct answer. Here's the next problem. The 7th grade has 220 students. 3/5 of the students are girls. How many boys are in the 7th grade? I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on the problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said 88, that is the correct answer. So how do we do this problem? You take the total amount of students, which is 220, and you times it by the fraction to find out how many girls that you actually have. And so you can make your life easy. You don't have to do 220 times 3 and then trying to divide that by 5. You can first start off with 220 divided by 5, which is equal to 44. And then 44 times 3 is equal to 132 girls. And so now that we know the amount of girls we have and we know the total amount, you take the total amount and minus the amount of girls that we have, and that will give you the amount of boys that is there. And so 220 minus 132 is equal to 88. And that's how you get to your final answer. And here is the next problem. Manuel makes bird food by mixing sunflower seeds and corn kernels. He bought 2.5 pounds of sunflower seeds. He also bought some corn kernels. Sunflower seeds and corn kernels each cost $2.20 per pound. The total amount Manuel spent on the sunflower seeds and corn kernels was $9.35. Enter the number of pounds of corn kernels Manuel purchased. I'll let you pause the video and work on this problem. Okay, now that you worked on this problem, let's see if you got the correct answer. So if you said 1.75 pounds, that is the correct answer. And how do we do that? Is first starting off with trying to have a general equation where on the right side of the equation, the right side of the equal sign, you have the total cost, which is $9.35. And then on the left side, you have the components that makes up that cost, which is the sunflower seeds and the corn kernels. Now we have to figure out how much the cost of the sunflower seeds and the corn kernels. And so we know that we have 2.5 pounds of sunflower seeds. And we know the rate, which is $2.20 per pound. So we times those two values together, because if the desired unit is in the numerator, we are timesing to make sure that we have dollar amounts. And then for the corn kernel, we have no idea how many pounds of corn kernels that we have. That is what we're trying to solve for. So write whatever letter you want to have there. I just put a capital C there. And whatever that is, you have to times it by the rate. That's why you can have it in units of total cost of the corn kernels. And then from there, now we got to solve for this algebraic expression. And so how do we do that is we take 2.5 and you times it by the $2.20 as the cost of the sunflower seeds. Now we have the $2.20 times whatever the pound amount of corn kernel. And then if you times these two values together, you will have the dollar amount of the corn kernels. Then from there, we got to solve for C. And so therefore, we got to get rid of this $5.50. And so we got to minus $5.50 on both sides of the equal sign because we got to keep things balanced. And then from there, $5.50 gets canceled out and you're left with $2.20 times whatever the pound amount of corn kernels. And that equals to $3.85. Now we got to get C by itself. And we got to do the reciprocal. Since it's being times by $2.20, we have to divide by $2.20. So $2.20 divided by $2.20 is equal to 1. And you have to do it the same thing on the opposite side of the equal sign. And that is $3.85 divided by $2.20. And that will end up giving you 1.75, and that is the pounds of corn kernels that you have. And that concludes the discussion of algebraic expressions and equations.